We live in a world that makes it far too easy to overlook. Overlook the homeless, overlook the oppressed, overlook injustice, overlook the ways in which our laws and our institutions continue to disadvantage many at the benefit of a few. Overlook the lives of far too many lost. As a nation prepares to celebrate the life and ministry of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I wonder if he was ever tempted by an allegiance to security and safety, if he ever was tempted to placate the powers that be, if he was ever tempted to return evil for evil and overlook the need of those around him. If he did, where would this country be, and who else today wouldn't be free? It is far too easy for me and many of us from our places of privilege and power to remain silent when tested with the same moral questions today. There were many other actions Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King could have taken, but ultimately he chose risk over safety, action over inaction, nonviolence over violence. He could have tolerated injustice and tried to make the best of it, but he didn't. Instead, he called for a love so strong that hate had no chance. If he hadn't, where would we be now? It's a choice we are called to make today. Comfort and safety compete for our allegiances over duty and justice every day. Will we watch from the sidelines behind media propaganda that demonizes those willing to take a stand? Or will we join hands in solidarity with those taking to the streets in acts of nonviolent sacred defiance? Are we comfortable in our churches as young men of color are still unsafe? Are we silent as we watch numbers of trans women murdered continue to rise? Have we too soon forgotten about the lives of Eric, Trayvon, and Mike? Do we even know the names of Tony Gretchen, Leila Ailcorn, or Brittany Sturgis? Trans women lost this year to gender-based violence. The truth is there are too many people to name and too many names that go uncounted, unreported, and even unnoticed. It is an epidemic that plagues us far beyond even the media's portrayal and is something we must not forget. We must not stop crying and responding to the inequality that lives in our institutions, our policies, our hearts, and our culture. And we can't stop there. We must continue to join hands until all are truly free. Our heart should be breaking. Our body is broken. If we are all the body of Christ, then what does it mean that when we cut off our hand or cut off our foot? It would seem as if institutional powers are trying to cut them off for us or pit us against one another, so we cut them off ourselves. And sometimes it feels like the more we march, the more violence increases. The more we assert ourselves and begin to create community, the harder society works to maintain the status quo. The more we work to expose the inadequacies of our institutions, the more those clinging to power and privilege it affords them fight harder to keep it. The stronger we become, the more systems of oppression work to divide us. As is said in the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, the oppressor must divide the oppressed and keep it divided in order to remain in power. By putting us at odds with one another, by creating false division that pits our needs at odds, they continue to keep us powerless, because they know together we will be far too strong to have our lives rendered invisible and meaningless. When will the body of Christ become the beloved community and stand together against hate and injustice that seeks to divide us? Years ago, MLK prophesied that now is a time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. And indeed, now is still the time. Now is a time to overturn the tables of injustice. Now is a time to overturn the tables of racism. Now is a time to overturn the tables of homophobia, transphobia, sexism, classism, and ableism. Now is a time for our house of prayer to be one for all people and not a robber's den of the privileged at the expense of the poor. We are not done yet. We are called to be the body of Christ. We are called to be beloved community. We are a broken body. As a people and as a community, our body is still hurting from racism. Our body is still impacted by sexism. Our body is still limited by heteronormativity and binary gender roles. And our body is still the oppressed and the oppressor. Our body still suffers with HIV and AIDS. Our body is still broken. And still we cut ourselves off from one another. But through love, we are called to something better. And we must not settle for anything less than the very kingdom of beloved community on earth. We must not stop calling, praying, and pleading, and yes, demanding for the healing until all are free and we live peacefully in the beauty of our diversity and our difference. Let it be.